Okay, so in an ideal world, we should be live now. So how's it going, everybody? This is
Like
the
like now.
like nowish.
Now.
We should be
Now.
live nowish.
Oh, wow.
But in an ideal world, we should actually be
Technology.
live. Technology shouldn't be breaking on us. We might have the cameras break on us like it did with our first episode. If that happens, I apologize. We'll get it fixed as fast as possible.
We'll cry a lot,
We really
but
will.
but we'll be back at that point. This is a weird glitch tech that we're trying to figure things out with. But hello, welcome to Hammered Out. Happy Thursday.
We finally
And
said it
I'm
this time. Holy shit!
right, exactly. We're here with Luciano's Logic. It was he runs a YouTube channel. He's also very interested in interfaith efforts and peace and conflict management. So I am also getting an echo somewhere,
Shouldn't be from me. I'm not
probably
hearing an
from
echo at all.
somewhere else. It must be this other window I have open. All right, cool. So anyway, my incompetence. But anyway, let me toss it off to you, Luciano. Introduce yourself and say hello.
Hi, hi everyone. I am Luciano's Logic, aka Luciano Joshua Gonzalez, and I am a humanist, writer, atheist, and Puerto Rican, just living and working in Washington, D.C.
Excellent. And with that, I know that as an atheist, you also have a YouTube channel, a Twitter that you're pretty active on, and you've got a blog. And I've actually got all of those linked in the description, so if you guys want to check those out after the video, all those will be there.
It's fun.
I would appreciate it if you guys would check it out. By the way, you guys are gonna see me looking a lot to the side. I have two computers, and I have the other one set to be on the chat, so I can actually look at and respond to messages. I promise I'm listening. I can hear everything. I just want to be in two places at once, which is impossible. So wish me luck.
Awesome.
Fair enough.
So let's see. Another one of the things that we wanted to kind of jump into was you've got a lot of activism involving Latinx. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Latinx activism, minority representation, and such, and that involved in those efforts is a lot of interfaith outreach on your end, and you're also working with an atheist organization as well, right? I believe it's correct me if I'm wrong, American Atheists, is that right?
Yes.
Or is that...
I have many hats. In addition to all of the stuff that was just said, I am also a graduate student at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. So I am everywhere all at once. But
it was impossible to be in two places at once. You seem to be doing
so far I'm doing pretty good. I'm wondering when I'm going to reach like the edge, and then I'm just gonna like collapse in on myself.
See what he's doing is he realizes he can't be in multiple places at once, but he also realizes that even though he's got one head, he can wear multiple hats.
Do you at the same time stacking them up on one each other like Dr. Seuss?
Well, you see, I know that you would know this as a believer, but not as a believer in the same sense as many other people in this country. But people like wearing many hats. People like wearing silly hats. So I'm focusing more on the multiple hats than the silly hats.
God damn.
No one came here expecting to be roasted.
Nobody.
And I'm broke. You broke me.
Well then, welcome.
So anyway,
that's okay. This is a discussion, and wherever it happens to go, it happens to go there. And if I
feel free to roast me, by the way, I'm very easy to roast. I'm not immune to the roasting.
Oh, with that face, we know.
Oh wow! All right, Doris is coming out strong. All right, so I guess introduce us a little bit into like what you do, and far as with respect to interfaith, and your kind of approach to that, like with your activism and the interfaith aspect of it. If you want to just give us like a brief introduction into that aspect of it.
Sure. So for me, what interfaith means is different religions and different philosophies of life or life stances working together in order to build something that's better for everyone. And to that end, I have never been afraid to welcome people of different religious beliefs and of different philosophies into my life and to work with them on things that we agree and positions that we share. And for me, the way that that takes shape is that I have different shows and I work in different spaces where I work with believers of various things, not just people who are Christians, Muslims, or Jews, but also polytheists in various shades. And it's something that I deeply enjoy because more so than being an atheist, I am a humanist. And for those of you who don't know the distinction, atheism is just a lack of belief in something. And I know most of the people here will understand that. It's the lack of belief in God. But humanism is a series of positions and beliefs that relate to the basic idea that human beings can live morally fulfilling and morally satisfying lives without belief in gods or without belief in the supernatural. And this doesn't necessarily preclude people who are believers from being humanists, but there's a definite implication in this country and in Latin America when you call yourself or when you call someone else a humanist that they are a non-believer.
Gotta say also, I can assume that the implication might be that anytime somebody says they're a humanist, the like let's say a Christian, for example, would probably say, "Oh, so you're putting yourself before God," and that would be the negative connotation that would come out of that.
Did humanism start out with Christianity, if I recall correctly? It was like Christian humanism has a pretty long tradition as well. And there's also, like, I think humanism has popped up in a couple of other religions, but it's I think it's more to do with the claim of human rights, isn't it?
Yeah, it's more focused, like whatever your religious beliefs are. Humanism more so refers to the way that you approach ethics and morality, which is part of the reason why there's a certain faction of humanists, including secular humanists, who are trying to make people realize that there are humanistic approaches and humanistic histories in a wide range of religious traditions. And I think that's something that's very important for people to do. And though I am the co-chair of a specific humanist group, the Latinx Humanist Alliance, I want people to realize that when I talk about humanism, I'm not just talking about atheists and non-believers, although atheists and other non-believers generally feel more welcome when people are talking about humanists than theists do.
And for those who are watching who are unaware, Latinx is just the gender neutral between Latino and
Latina.
Yeah, I know there are some people that probably would be going, Latinx, is that some kind of like weird new movement? Like, no, it might sound like it kind of sort of, but no, it's literally it's just a gender neutral term.
And it's not without controversy, and I feel like that's worth noting. But there are going to be people who watch this video, lots of people from my neck of the woods and from like my spaces who are going to be seeing this video either now or later on, who are probably not going to be fans of the term. And if you're not a fan of the term, I have no issue with that. If it makes you feel any better, you can go ahead and call the group that I'm with the Latino Humanist Association. But that's not the name. And I've said that I've talked about the group in multiple podcasts over the course of the last couple of weeks. I've said the same thing. I don't care if you call it the name or not, but that's not the name.
I mean, that's the approach I would take to that is that if somebody says the Latino movement instead of the Latinx movement based on what the name actually is, then I would almost always just respond sarcastically, well, I have no idea who you're talking about, but that's not us.
I mean, like, for me, it's a matter of, like, the work that we do matters more than the name. And right. if you like the movements, if you like the ideas that we're espousing aside from the name, I say you get in contact with us, you work with us, and you talk to us. But our name, it's just not as important as the work we're doing. So I'm not going to like try to push people away on that basis.
It seems like that with the interfaith outreach, a lot of what you're working with would be Catholics. Is that right?
Well, once I start working more specifically with theists, it will definitely be Catholics and evangelicals of various sorts, because in places like Honduras, the number of evangelicals is either equal to or about to like overtake the number of Catholics.
Okay, I did not know. That's wow. But yeah, I get, like, how do you approach kind of like trying to build that bridge then? Or is that like, what are some strategies for being able to do that with like large groups of people, I guess?
So I think that something that's very important to do is to establish common grounds and to reach people where they are. So something that I want to do and something that I'm in the process of doing is reaching out to places like churches and asking them, sending them emails being like, hey, I'm a humanist, I'm a non-believer. I don't know if your church has ever had any contact with humanists or with non-believers, but if it hasn't, or even if it has and you would like for it to, I would love to go over to you guys and have conversations with you. And I'm willing to do this in English or in Spanish, which are the two languages that I'm fluent in. I have worked with people in the past who've been theistic, usually Christians, but not always Christians, who have been interested in this sort of outreach and having these sorts of conversations. It's something that a lot of places are actually surprisingly receptive to. Even places in small towns in North Carolina and in Georgia have been more than open to the idea of having conversations with non-believers and inviting non-believers. That way non-believers can come and share why it is that they're non-believers and to explore what people have in common.
That said, if you end up doing anything in Georgia, let me know so I can come with you. Because I think that would be an interesting thing.
Yeah. I actually went to high school in Georgia. I graduated from a high school in Georgia, but I was only there for a semester. It was the very last semester that I was in high school.
Now I want to know what town. Because I was in like Boonies, North Georgia. That's where I graduated in high school.
Oh, I went to Hardaway High School in Columbus because my dad's in the military and we were in Fort Benning.
Gotcha.
Okay.
That
awesome.
The reason why you were there for a semester now also makes sense.
Yeah.
I got family down there just south of Columbus. So,
but speaking of things that don't make sense, not to derail the conversation too hard, but it seems that our stream is in direct competition with somebody who likes the wrong kind of peanut butter right now.
Oh, is it really? Wait, is GI alive?
Yes, he is.
Going to be live right now.
GI is live.
He's attacking. His affinity for Peter Pan.
This will not stand. Okay, we need to go in and just let him have it.
So, you mentioned as well the outreach with polytheists. Now, I'm like, I know that we have a mutual friend, Queen, who is a Mesoamerican polytheist. But is there others that you've worked with as well, or is there, I guess, talk a little bit about that kind of experience.
So I actually have friends who are Hindu that I've been interested in working with in the past, and I haven't yet sent them emails, but that's something that I'm going to be doing in the next couple of days. I have been doing a lot of things behind the scenes, like making my own website and getting work done on my own podcast. So it's been a fun experience trying to manage all of this time that I don't have. But I am interested in working with a wide range of different people. One of the things that I want to do that you know about is that I want to create a multi-faith PAC, a political action committee. And the reason I want to do this is that I want to get groups together who are religious minorities and who care about political issues and who realize what's at stake if people who are the bad type of Christians, as in the Christians who want to destroy the separation of church and state, gain too much power. And I want people to work together to sponsor and to help candidates and politicians who are interested in preserving the separation of church and state and who care about a wide range of multi-faith issues. And I feel like there's enough common ground between people who are atheistic and people who are polytheistic and other religious minorities that we could do this if the right voices get involved.
Yeah, I actually do see that a lot from friends of mine who are polytheistic, not just Ocean, but other ones that I've grown up with as well. It almost always seems that atheists and polytheists get along easier when it comes to issues of faith than Christians do, and it's probably because polytheism is just a little bit less exclusive.
No, you'll hear me rant on that. Like as far as Christianity being like an exclusivity tradition. That you have to believe in the certain thing in order to receive the rewards of it, and there's a couple of other religions that have that front, but with polytheism it's generally not the case. It's not like a belief focused thing. It's more about deeds in life. Like a heathen phrase, for example, is "we are our deeds," and that's it kind of embodies that. But I guess like with at least most heathens that I've bumped into, and polytheists in general, they seem to be more in line with gay marriage, trans rights, any like a lot of the hot topics right now with respect to like gender expression and such. The polytheists tend to be leaning more to the left on that, along with atheists, it seems.
With the notable exception of a particular group that do you want to get into them a little bit?
Let's get into that in a second, because I think
that's a can of worms.
We brought up both Queen and that, and that's a thing. But I guess what are some other areas of like common ground that you've identified as well as far as with polytheists? I guess both of you, since I'm the polytheist.
With me, something that I think is very interesting is that there is a long-lasting history, and Queen would be far better for this than I would. I hope that one day she can appear on a stream somewhere where she can talk about this. But there's a long history of Mesoamerican religions being very open, and I feel like people oversimplify this for a variety of reasons, but basically what this amounts to is polytheistic religions in Latin America and all throughout the Americas really have a long history of being very adaptive and being capable of taking in new gods and honestly integrating them very seamlessly into their own original theistic cosmologies. And this is something that I think is very interesting. I think that there is a little bit of a common ground with atheists there because atheists have a history of surviving and overcoming oppression and making it in places that it seems very unlikely for atheists to make it. So I think that there's a little bit of a historical common ground there.
I think that's definitely true. I think there's definitely a resilience tradition among both. That's an interesting parallel. I hadn't thought of that.
Especially dealing with the South, like growing up here. When I was a Christian, I would hear the laments of my friends who were polytheists and pagans growing up. That's why I had me and Ocean had a conversation about this once, where he was just like, you seem to just accept polytheists pretty well. It's like, yeah, I grew up with them. But the ones that I dealt with down here, it seems that most of them have dealt with that, just little bits of micro oppression, just going through high school just because of those beliefs, because they were different. And when I was a Christian, it just didn't occur to me that was a thing that was even happening to them. And as soon as I started dealing with all that myself, I was just like, oh, this is what you've been dealing with. I understand now.
There's actually a really weird history in Latin America, and there have been tweets by myself and Queen and other people who are involved in Hispanic religion and theology that have looked at this in a little bit of depth. But there's a weird history with how Catholics dealt with different religious beliefs at different points in time. At various points throughout the history of Latin America, there were times when the Catholics thought it was better to wipe out the native religions. And then in other times, they tried to find ways to integrate the native religions into their own unique version of Catholicism. This process historically has been referred to as a sort of syncretism, but it's very interesting because you can actually find points in time and you can find specific individuals who reacted with differing, in very specific different ways to try and deal with religion. Either they tried to invent stories of how the old gods in Latin America were demons that were evil and should be ignored, or they tried to wipe out the religions altogether. And I'm glad that for the most part, there was a long history of them not trying to wipe out the old religions, but it really sucks that they had to demonize all of these different beliefs and try to force them away.
We see a little bit of that syncretism in Day of the Dead, right? It's like a combining of Halloween. Is that what it is? A combining of Halloween with kind of Mayan Aztec traditions, or
there's definite ways that can be seen. But I actually have an article on Pathos where I talked about the sort of cinematography of the Day of the Dead in Coco and in the Book of Life. Yeah. And I noted that it doesn't really this idea of the Day of the Dead, where you honor your ancestors in these specific ways, you give them candy and you go and you almost pray at their graves, don't really come from any specific culture. They don't come from Christianity and they don't come from the Aztec beliefs. Now, I can see how it is that someone could fuse these beliefs and could eventually arrive there, but it's not like a direct line.
Sure.
Okay. Just one of those things that you can infer some things, but it's not very easy to find a real cut and dry way the historicity happened.
Yeah.
I guess we can dive a little bit into the thing with Queen. For those of you guys that don't know, Queen is a Mesoamerican polytheist that was on Twitter for some time. Mm-hmm. Somebody that I've been promoting a little bit because I think that like she's a voice that she's extremely educated, and voice that I want to promote as much as possible. But she's recently left Twitter, and I can't speak too much to the motivations of the reason why. But what I can say is that she had been receiving some harassment from a certain brand of heathens known as folkists, and I sent you guys some of the evidence of that, of people that were kind of like going after her. And both of you had reactions to it. I guess I want you to, if you guys want to analyze those reactions.
My reaction as soon as I started looking through not just the account in question.
Let's not name the account.
Yeah, we're not going to name the account because giving them exposure is not what we want to do. Completely separate video that can do that if need be. Right. But my response was, I need a hammer now and this person's face. Right. If I could just get their face within good proximity of this, I'm sure I could make something happen.
And it wasn't like the group or the brand of person is known as a folkist.
Yes.
And what they tend to be is like racial purity types, as well as sometimes, they're not consistent on this, but sometimes very homophobic. Like they lean like hard traditionalist into the homophobia aspect, which is odd considering a lot of our legends. Like there's a point in which Loki is impregnated by a horse. So like, there's not, our legends are strange, but there's not really the homophobia aspect of it coming out of it doesn't make very much sense when you consider the legends.
Yeah, it's like, hey, are you gonna? So it's like, which gods? I'm pretty sure there's at least one that honors Loki or honors any god that has gone through one of those interesting,
but a lot of
legends. It's very strange to me that you would say, which god do you honor? This one. Okay, so what did they do in this story? Let's see.
That notification we were talking about.
Yep, there's a notification.
And we got while you were looking at that, we got a super chat from Zero.
See that.
For $7.77. He says, "No more peanut butter." Hashtag
that's definitely a different take compared to like the other sides of the peanut butter war.
No more peanut butter. No, I'm sorry. Peanut butter is wonderful, and the peanut butter wars will continue. I am waiting on Godless Iowans' response so the peanut butter war can continue. We've gotten like one or two people that are like not very happy that this is a thing that's happening, but Thursdays and Mondays, you guys will always get, when I upload them, you guys will always get my videos, and they will always be the videos that are on topic. Anything I do in the middle, just be happy that it's coming.
By the way, I understand your point of view in this war. I hated your video today. It was disgusting. You like put peanut butter in a pan, and that was just. Ugh. Like, I don't even disagree with your side in the war. Just seeing peanut butter in a pan and then seeing all the stuff you put on it, it hurt me.
So, sir, if you want to grab that remaining meeting time thing that has popped up.
Yeah, I'm trying.
It's seeing right on the. It's at 8 minutes now. We're trying to avoid losing ourselves. But Luciano, I sent you that the tweet, I guess, and I know. What was your kind of like take on it?
So. I feel like it's worth pointing out that I am a historian, and I am not. I don't know what the right word would be. I'm not someone who like practices the traditions of my ancestors or anything, but I have admiration for people like that. So I adore Queen. She is one of my favorite people on Twitter, and I was furious when I saw that sort of harassment was going on, because that is some grade A nonsense, and no one deserves to go through it. Even if it's someone I actually disagreed with, they wouldn't have deserved to go through that sort of shit. But to know that it was happening to someone who I admire and someone whose voice I had a lot of respect for makes it a lot worse.
All right, and then I went on a little bit of a crusade on that, which you did a post, and it seemed to get retweeted several times and all that. So that's another. I think that like that little moment there is a good example of just like an interfaith effort of like, hey, we all agree, basic human respect, right? And I did see like a lot of atheists jump on that as well, in addition to you, and as well as a lot of polytheists being like, okay, this is just inappropriate. That we shouldn't be like, and I think that Cyrus and I will probably be planning a video in the future that'll discuss like why, even from a spiritual perspective, that like the racial purity traditions are absolutely silly under the context of polytheism. But then going further and then treating people in a certain way that seems to be based on bigotry values imported from Christianity is incredibly frustrating.
And that's kind of one of the reasons that I have a polytheist on my channel as an actual co-host on a podcast. That's literally an interfaith effort. Like, by definition.
Everything we do is interfaith.
Right. But yeah. I don't know. Tossing ball back to people.
I'm desperately trying to get this thing upgraded so that we can actually maintain without dying. But
so when that thing runs down, is that just going to be the end of the episode, or are we just going to hop on?
We'll get another link sent out, and then we just jump right back into it. For those of you that are watching, there is like this little timer. It's got like 5 minutes on it because we're using this service for free, and it's hanging over all of our heads right now. Look at it and be like, Cyrus, fix the thing.
We can see it, and like I'm looking on the other screen, and you guys can't. So it's probably really weird that we're talking about it, but it's really ominous.
Yeah. It's just like nobody can see it, but here we are looking at it, just like,
it's the elephant in the room, and the actual problem at hand for those who just so everybody understands, is that there's a pop-up that needs to come up on the other page, and it keeps telling me that my pop-ups are blocked, but I know they aren't. I have gone in and disabled the thing that's blocking my pop-ups. It doesn't like me.
So we just might watch this timer kill us. Is that what you're saying?
This is that whole issue where like you just watch the world end and you're watching the timer go down and you know there's nothing you can do. So you might as well make the most of the time that you're watching the world and then it ends.
Okay.
So it's like Majora's Mask, but we don't even have the power to turn back time. Great.
Yeah, at least in Majora's Mask you could slow things down as well.
Yeah.
So I guess let's jump in a little bit into another topic that we had talked about beforehand, which was, and we might get just bumped off in the middle of this, but let's try and ignore the damn timer and get on with the show.
Yep.
With your atheism and your activism, you're very, very open about who you are, what you do, where you are even. And with a lot of YouTubers and a lot of, I'm speaking for myself a little bit here, like I go under an alias. Cyrus goes under an alias. We don't like talking about like, you know, who we really are, where we work and all this other stuff. But you have taken a strategy of just being like, hey, I'm very upfront. Here I am. This is who I am. This is what I do. What like inspired you to take that approach, and how is it like, you know, what inspired you to take that approach, and what differences have you seen from it?
So with me, I decided, because I come from a community where being, and this is kind of the case in every community in this country, but there are other countries where being an atheist isn't someone who's in the minority. And not only am I in the minority as an atheist, I'm also asexual. I am Puerto Rican, although I look and kind of am white. I managed to be both at the same time, which is a fun thing. But I come from places where I am a minority. And in those places, there's lots of pressure on people to conform to just the norm. And even if you don't conform, to shut up. And I decided from the minute I realized that I was an atheist, that wasn't going to be the approach that I take. And I'm probably going to do a longer continuous video on this, because you guys aren't the first people to ask me about this, although this is the first time that I talk about this publicly. I figured that if I was going to be open and honest, and if I was going to be an activist, I had a couple of privileges. My family was relatively accepting of me. The people that I've dated have been accepting of who I really am and of me being honest. And there's no point where I'm in any serious physical danger. And this is very, oh, yes, got it.
Sweet.
Okay, cool.
No more
No more timer. Yes. Now that that's out of the way.
Well on the timer, though, I commend you. All right, now that we can settle back in, guys. Go ahead.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm lucky and I'm privileged in a variety of ways to have a family that's open and accepting of me, whether it is my asexuality, whether it is my atheism, whether it's my political views, although I actually do agree politically with most of the people in my family. So that's something that's nice. But in all the other things, I have family members who care about me and who accept me for who I am. And I know that there are a lot of people who aren't going to have that privilege. And it really is, because I have friends who've been kicked out of their homes because they were open about being an atheist or they were open about being LGBT. And I know that since I have that privilege, it would be kind of bad if I didn't take advantage of it. And that's not to say that everyone else has to take the same route that I took, because also I'm getting paid to work in atheism, which is not something that other people can say, unless people are actually making a living off of YouTube or off of their writing, which is the case for some of my friends, but isn't the case for a lot of atheist activists, especially in the South.
Right.
It's sad how many times the South.
On top of it, isn't it?
It's sad how many times the South comes up in conversation whenever we're talking about stuff like this. But
it's come up. We've done 3 episodes, and I think the South has come up in all 3 of them.
It pretty much has. I would like to put in just a small plug, real quick, just not to interrupt right now. But so Zoom actually does require a monthly subscription. So I would like to personally thank Zero again for the super chat that he gave earlier, because that is directly paying for our ability to have the podcast in general. Also, hosting the podcast on any other platform besides YouTube also has its own financial burdens as well. So if anybody who is sending super chats in, the super chats that are coming in, those aren't going in for profit or anything right now. Most of that is going in straight to just letting the podcast be a thing that exists. So people who are doing super chats, thank you very much for people who are doing it in the future, and people who've already done super chats, thank you for that. All right, there's my little shameless plug for putting peanuts in a jar.
Yeah, definitely. I want to echo that. And I guess I'll piggyback a little bit off of what you were saying, Luciano, with my, as far as my background with being polytheist, in the South, I have a Southern family and everything like that. As one side of my family is not super religious. They are more I guess nominally Christian in some cases, and other cases they're sometimes lean a little bit more into that realm. But often it's more of just it's more of a cultural thing. So they're not super religious, and they're a little surprised by the idea of fundamentalists on that side of the family. The other side of the family, on the other hand, is more of your traditional Southern family. And but I don't get into very much issues with any of them because of how I try to approach the issue. For me, and I think this applies with Interfaith, is that if I'm in the home of my more religious Christian family, in their practice of Thanksgiving or their practice of Christmas or whatever, I'm a guest. So I go with the traditions of the people that I'm visiting. That means praying at the table. That means, that whatever religious, that going to church with them or whatever. That's, I don't see it as necessarily a problem. I'm sure that if the roles were reversed in some cases, maybe they would have some problem with participating in a pagan Yule ritual or something like that. But that's a bridge that hasn't been quite crossed. However, as a result, I haven't had much issue with my family as far as my spirituality, even though I am pretty out and open even to them about it. And part of that is that. Part of it is how I've been able to approach it, and part of it is definitely their maturity. I know a lot of people have families that come from the same background as mine that wouldn't respond that way.
They handle it less than well. I guess I'll hop off. I'm not hopping off the stream. That would be a horrible idea. I know there are some fans that would probably be quite happy with me leaving, but that's fine. I'll just go back to my peanut butter war. it's kind of the same situation as mine, although mine is less. If I'm asked to go to church with a family member, I'll politely decline. But that's something that I did even when I was a Christian most of the time, is that if they were going to a church,
I won't take communion, for example.
Yeah,
but,
like there's certain parts that you'll just abstain from. Like when we did the pagan thing with you as well. There are some things that, like, I'm here for the event. There are certain things that I'll abstain from because I'm not part of, insert faith here. The only exceptions that I make, though, is that, like, when there's prayer at the table, I might keep my eyes open, but I will never do anything to disrupt anything. I'll just politely let everybody do the thing that they need to. With the exception, the only time that I will say anything is if I am asked to be the one that leads the prayer, in which case I will go, no, not me. I don't want to go into reasons.
It's also worth noting that, like, the route that I've taken, I'm not going to say that it's easier, although there are very real and obvious advantages to being a public figure and an identifiable voice and face to these issues. But I've gotten death threats before. I have had to call the police on more than one occasion on people who were threatening me who lived in the same town that I lived in. And these were people who read my blog. So, like, in addition to that, there's also the fact that when I came out as asexual, there was a family member who called me and asked me if I had been raped. And this is a really common, it's not a really common thing, but it's a fairly common thing.
That hurts so
that,
much.
like, and I know now thinking back, I probably should have said something before I said that, because that's like a really heavy thing to just jump into. Right. But it's a reality for a lot of asexual people. And
they think that it's because of some kind of trauma that happened. They don't really understand orientations that well.
But, like, it's such a common thing that for context, I came out publicly last year on National Coming Out Day, which is October 11th. And I came out in a public Facebook post, which is not what I did with my atheism. With my atheism, I came out publicly online before I told my family members, but I still told my family members in private. Whereas I decided to be a little bit bolder with my asexuality, which was a mistake.
So a lot of your family found out from a public Facebook post?
Yeah.
That's fun.
Ocean, doesn't that sound kind of like the situation I was in as well, where I did my thing through a video and that backfired horribly?
See, I didn't come out as a pagan that way. It just kind of, like, I got to a point where I just stopped keeping it a secret, where when people asked, I would say something. And that was my version of coming out. It was just like, well, I'm not going to, like, make a big deal about it. I'm just going to be honest when people ask me. And that worked out with, like, every once in a while, another family member would hear about it and they'd give me a call or something like that. The one big conversation that I had was with an aunt of mine that's a creationist. And she called me and she wanted to debate me on the topic one time. It didn't go well. And she hasn't said anything since about that. And we get along fine. But, she's a creationist, I'm not. And cool.
So when you say creationist, do you just mean creationist in general, or is she a young earther? I
mean, when I was a kid, she sent me books of describing the dinosaurs going onto the ark and how Adam named the dinosaurs.
Young earther, got it. Cool.
Right. This was like I didn't know who Kent Hovind was, but I got the books and was like, oh, cool. Like the thing that Ray Comfort put out some time ago that was a riot for a little while, like that. It's books like that, like stuff like that, like things you would. I don't know if it was from Ken Ham, but you would expect it from that guy. There's that kind of stuff, but my approach to it was be like, all right, don't make a big deal. I'm not it's family. I'm not here to, like, debate or go crazy with family. It's
it's where you have to.
I didn't have, like, a coming out thing. It was just, but in college, however.
In college you had the thing.
I went to a Christian school and as a pagan, and I wound up interacting a lot with Christians that wanted to convert me. So, and because I was just like, I'm going to be honest about it, and I was at a school that was small and Christian, and word traveled fast. So then, it became like I became the pagan kid pretty quickly, which was fun, but it came with its challenges.
I would have imagined so, especially since all three of us came from some form of Christian schooling.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that, like, most of the friends that I had from the time I was in Christian school, since creating my channel, have become my enemies. Like, they've actively made it a point to just... Like, I have some very, very detailed comments on some videos from them.
I have lost friends. Like, it's never been online, because the entire time that I've been online and have been active as a voice, I've been an atheist. But I lost friends in real life. Like, and it was in some cases very bad. Like, we had public falling outs when I declared my atheism, and when people were just like, hey, we want to talk to you about religion. Like, that never went well for anyone involved, especially the first year. But after that, I found out that there were family members of mine, and this is one of the biggest reasons why I'm a public figure and a public voice, or at least I'm trying to become a public figure and a public voice. I have family members who spent their whole lives being either agnostic, polytheistic, or atheistic, and they came up to me and were just like, hey, we've always been afraid to say that we are not Christian, but now that we know that there's someone else in the family who is unapologetic and open and still nice, it's really reassuring. And that's something that I'm sure other people, probably even people in the chat who are lucky enough to be open and honest with their families, have probably experienced as well.
I think one of the worst things about that, too, is that you... correct me if I'm wrong, but you probably had some family members who might not have even known that each other were atheistic or polytheistic, or, you know, insert religion that's not Christianity. They might not have even known that each other were, and they kept on a facade around each other for fear of the repercussions.
Yeah.
I had an interesting conversation that was very much like that with, we'll just say, an older member of my family. And when, she asked me about my religion. We had just gone to church and come back. And it was with the side of my family. It was more like the nominally Christian, sort of culturally kind of thing. And she started asking me some questions about what is it that I believe, why, and so on. And we just had like a quick discussion, and she was just like, I agree with all of that. And I was like, wait, are you... Wait, no, you're kind of pagan, aren't you? And she's like, yeah, I guess I am, a little bit. That's neat. And then there wasn't much more to it than that, but it was like, cool.
Yeah, generally that's kind of what happened with like some of the members on my dad's side of the family that I disconnected with, just because there was a little bit of a rift that caused some of us to not really get along that much. But since creating my channel, since I was public about it and it's posted on my Facebook all the time so they all can see it, I did end up getting messages from some of them and reconnecting with them when they were like, no, we believe pretty much the same thing and we like your content, and it's weird to see that you're on camera all the time. And I'm like, it's weird to see that you're saying that.
Yeah, it's really weird when your family members watch your content. And I feel like that's even funnier coming from me because I live with my mom and dad. I didn't live with my mom and dad when I started making content, but I do now, which is very interesting. And like, my mom and dad read and in some cases share the stuff that I create. And it's just because they're like, they managed to be proud of me despite the fact that we believe different things. And that's something that I really appreciate because like, I have friends that I've encouraged to come out to their families, and in most cases it's gone well, but not in every case. So it's nice to be living with and seeing reminders that there are stories that end well for people who are Hispanic, who are bold enough to come out.
And I guess to take it back a little bit to Interfaith as well, have you encountered resistance on the Interfaith approach? Because I think that I have, I know Cirrus has as well.
Yeah.
I've encountered it on both sides, on both the atheist side and even polytheists.
I'm sure you saw the encounter that I had with, I was told that his name was Oleg, but that was not his Twitter name. And an encounter I had with a polytheist after I tweeted about Latinx polytheists.
I did not see this.
This is
It was
interesting.
a
Story
very
time.
interesting encounter because I'm friends with someone who may or may not be theistic. I don't think he's theistic, but he's a Hispanic author, and he and I are good friends. I retweeted something of his, and I retweeted something of someone else's, and I started writing about like Latinx folks who were not theistic and who were not Christian. So who were polytheists and different beliefs that weren't Christian in the context of theology. There was some pretty heavy pushback from certain polytheists. For the most part, there were people who really like.
What was the argument from Orlik that sounds like a heathen? What was it, a heathen, or was it?
I actually don't know, because like from most of the other people who got involved on their side, it seemed like it was someone who was Hindu, because like all the other people had Hindu gods as their like avatars, and they had like the letters, they had the scripts that were not from Roman languages.
Got it.
So it was a very interesting experience, but that's not the only time I've encountered pushback. I've encountered pushback from friends who were in some of the same organizations as me, because I wrote an article a couple of years ago where I celebrated Hispanic theists and non-theists who weren't Christian. And I shared some of my friends, I shared some of the people I admire, including a Mexican Buddhist, a Spanish person, a Spanish Jew, that I can't think of the right word. It's like Akananzi, I think is it's Seraphic.
Okay.
Yeah, someone from there, and I know that was really bad. I was just trying to remember the right like wording. And also someone who is a Hispanic Wiccan. And I was like, hey, all these people are awesome. They're all people who are building communities and working together to build movements that are good and that are positive for everyone. And there were Hispanic atheists who were not happy with that article. They were very angry that I was celebrating people who were theistic who were also Hispanic, which was weird to me.
I've gotten that as well. It's not a fun situation when you've got people who are like, you don't understand, these people have done this in history. Why should we give them a voice? Why should we care about them? And you're just like, so wait a minute. So you're telling me that the best option we have is to fight a problem with the same tools that we don't like them using? Okay, you can go to your corner now.
What were some of the arguments you were hearing from them, that as far as like why this was a bad thing?
So from the polytheists, and like this is actually an understandable concern that I don't hugely disagree with, but it was basically that like I was kind of being an opportunist. And I disagree with the intent behind it, but like I can understand where that would come from. I can understand why someone would look at my tweets and think that. And also that like I didn't understand their idea of theology and of cosmology. And I'm just like, yeah, I don't, but I want to.
Coming from the perspective of, I don't see the reason of putting up that resistance unless you were like trying to tell us what we believe or something like that.
I wasn't, but I was tweeting about the need. It was some of the tweets that were involved were actually Queens and a couple of other people that we both probably know that were talking about like the need to defend against evangelism, which is something that I and most atheists that I know of agree with.
There's an agreement there.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, this is something that we share, and we all acknowledge that this is bad, and it's something that puts all of us in danger. Maybe not our lives, but like the continued existence of our positions are directly endangered by people who believe in evangelism. So we have common enemies that we need to be defending ourselves against. And then this person was just like, no, thanks. I'm still not going to work with you, though.
It's really weird.
I can do a little bit of that. The concerns that I've heard from polytheists as far as working with atheists, and the things that have been expressed to me, I can name drop somebody. His name is Edward Butler. He's very public about this opinion, that as far as working with atheists, the concern that he has is that he doesn't see much of a difference between Christianity and atheism. And his reason is that Christianity has the approach of wanting to erase everybody but them. And from his perspective, atheism generally has a similar approach. that they want to erase everybody but them, because they're using a lot of the same strategies as Christianity. And I think that there is some truth to that when it comes to atheist, like when it comes to atheist political action.
There is a little truth to that if you just take some of the responses that we've gotten from things.
Yeah,
there's truth. Right. There's truth to that in those responses.
Right, and but I think that like you have Christians that are like even that are Episcopalians and Universalist Unitarians and those kind, like, so with some respect Presbyterians as well, that are a little bit have more of an accepting approach of other traditions in their Christianity. You also have atheists that are kind of like the reverse side of that coin, I think.
Yeah,
that are more interested in cooperating.
You get the atheists that are like, we need to make more atheists. We need to get the atheist movement going and getting bigger. And I agree with the needing the atheist movement to get bigger, just because I like having more representation from my side. But I don't like trying to force people to convert. That reeks of the same stuff that I was told when I was a Christian. Was it like, hey, you need to go do soul winning and do stuff like that. That's the stuff that I was told. So, like, if I hear that from the atheist side, we need to argue with people and get them converted to atheism. It's like, no, we really don't. We just need to make sure that the voices we have are stronger and people can make their own decisions.
Yeah, does what I was talking about from Edward, or from Edward Butler, does that ring true to you as far as like what you were being told, Luciano, or is that?
So I feel like there's pressure in my specific community as a Hispanic atheist that there probably should be more voices that are interested in not necessarily making more atheists, but like in working to make sure that atheists have a place. And my approach is just like, hey, I have absolutely no issue working with anyone who doesn't want to convert me to their religion. And frankly, I am willing to make exceptions to this, provided we have goals in common that are strong enough to overcome my disdain for people who are going to come up to me and be like, my religion's true, and here's why. And I have never really had that approach to religion. I feel like I've wanted to have that approach to religion at various points, but it's never really been me. So like when I was writing as an anti-theist, and at the very beginning of my like time as an atheist writer, I was writing as an anti-theist. I'm not going to shy away from this. I wanted to argue
your angry atheist phase.
Yeah, my angry atheist phase. I wanted to argue against religion, and I very quickly realized that I just don't care enough. I don't like. There's certain things in religions that I don't like, but I do not care enough to argue against religion as a whole. That's just not my interest. It's not my approach. If it is other people's approaches, I'm not going to tell them how to live their lives. But at the same time, I'm just like, hey, I just want people to be able to believe or disbelieve whatever they want without feeling external, unnatural pressure to convert.
Yeah, I definitely agree that this is one of the reasons that there are some people on the theistic side that I'm able to get along with very well, is because they don't actively try to convert me, and a lot of times we have similar goals. Usually it's something along the lines of humanistic reasons, or wanting to simply elevate the theist versus atheist conversation, because there's a level of it that's nice and wonderful, and it's interesting to listen to the interlocutors, and then there's a level of it that's just mudflinging, and the mudflinging is fun for all of 5 minutes, and then after that point it's just kind of dumb. We're all people, and we all need to be working together to make the world a better place, and honestly, mudflinging doesn't help that.
I feel like I left behind a lot of. I had an angry pagan phase, and I've talked to a couple of other polytheists that do describe that as well. It's like as soon as there's a leaving of Christianity, and then there's like, I think it happens with atheists and pagans and anybody else who's just leaving Christianity for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. You get into this phase of like, I'm mad at this whole thing. That all the stuff that's the caging that it has. Mm. There's an anger to it, from there. And then there's a point of like, all right, well, I've undergone that now. Now we can try and look at these same things, not sacrificing that opinion, but having a certain amount of maturity in approaching it.
Well, especially there's a certain level of merit that comes from being able to say that you've had a position before and you've changed your position to a different one. It helps you be empathetic towards that side, as long as you're willing to not just be utterly disgusted with the person you used to be. Because I've met some atheists, and I'm sure Luciano has as well, that when they were Christian or they were, whatever religion that they were, they had such a revulsion to it once they deconverted that they were just disgusted with the person they used to be, not even realizing that they were the same person the whole time. They just had a different belief structure. And it causes them to lash out a lot when it's not even really necessary.
So I was actually having a conversation the other day with another Hispanic atheist named Hector Luis Almo. And he and I both had an angry atheist phase. And in our experience in the Hispanic atheist sphere, being an angry atheist or having an angry atheist phase, it seems to be, I'm not going to say common, but there's definitely a lot of people who have an angry atheist stage who come from like the same cultural backgrounds or similar cultural backgrounds to ours. And we briefly wondered about why that was. And I explained that at the very least for me, my parents weren't hugely strict believers, but I went to 2 different Christian schools. I went to one that was far more overt and brutal in its teachings, and that one was actually in North Carolina. And then I went to another one that was in Honduras that was like not actually a Christian school, but it was definitely a Christian school. And like it had like a Bible club. Most of the teachers were theists and they were open about their theism. So like I was still in the religion, but it was actually there where I was taught a more pragmatic sense of Christianity. And I was like told that the beliefs I had about like being homophobic and being almost a young earth creationist were wrong. So it's very interesting. And like that surprises people who aren't from Latin America. But people who are from Latin America and who hear that story are just like, yeah, because Latin American Christianity, it's not always like this, but Latin American Christianity is very unsuperstitious. It's a very pragmatic, real world form of Christianity. There's still lots of overtly theistic and I would say bad beliefs, but like young earth creationism definitely isn't uncommon in the South of the United States. It's practically unheard of in Latin America. There are not many young earth creationists or even creationists, like even old earth creationists in Latin America.
Even among the evangelicals?
Even among the evangelicals, these beliefs aren't as common as you'd think. They definitely have more, like, there's definitely more of them. And Ken Ham has actually gone to Honduras, which infuriated me. But like he went to a Honduran church.
You're in my house, son. Get out.
And like he taught there for like a couple of days. There's an article on Answers in Genesis where he's just like, yeah, I and some of my friends went to Honduras. It was great. We got to teach all these people in like Choluteca about young earth creationism, and they were all very receptive. And like I can feel him grinning when I read the article, and it makes me very angry.
I can imagine like welling up.
And anytime that I imagine Ken Ham getting happy, I can only help but be angry because of the things that I know make him happy.
Well, like it's worse now because he and I actually have a personal history now. But when I first read this article, we didn't. A couple of months ago in August.
All right, so you're already going into the story. Please tell us the story.
Okay, well, like most of the people here don't know who I am, so they don't know what the heck I'm talking about. But right. A couple of months ago, he made a very bad argument on Twitter that I responded to. And the argument was just like, hey, what is it that atheists can teach their kids when, atheists are nihilists? I responded and
oh yeah, I actually saw that
responded. One. And Shannon Q got involved. And
that's the one where you actually had an Answers News done on you.
Yes, and like no one told me until like I mentioned that it was retweeted, and then like one of my friends was just like, hey Luciano, you might want to check the latest Answers News video. And I like lost my shit because I was not expecting. I didn't think that I was big enough potatoes that anyone who was theistic should bother responding to me. And then like Ken Ham decides that I was wrong about that, which is kind of a nice ego boost, but also what he said was so bad and so wrong that it like kind of canceled it out.
When Ken Ham says that you're you're inherently wrong on something, that's where you just smile, give yourself a gold star, and realize that means you're doubly right. Like please give me an example where that doesn't hold true.
I mean, I've never heard him be right about something, and I'm sure at some point he has been. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he's wrong about everything.
He drank coffee in the morning, and he claimed that he did in fact drink coffee in the morning, and then Matt Slick runs in and goes, "But are you a brain of the vat?"
Wait, are you sure that's Matt Slick and not like Side 10 Budenkate?
No, Matt Slick does it as well. He has the solipsism retreat.
I've had that conversation with him.
Yeah. The fact that they both use that retreat is because it's a common retreat with the only intent of negating the opponent's position, without like actually understanding that to hold to solipsism negates the Christian position as well.
Well, holding most positions negates the Christian position. Like this is something. This is part of the reason. This is part of the reason I don't talk about Christianity, because like honestly, Christianity is a very weak religion, and I know it's kind of mean, and I know it's weird for me to be like talking smack, but it's true. Like it just doesn't make any sort of sense. Even the philosophical idea of like the classical God, the God of classical theism, is massively unchristian and very different from the deity of Christianity.
Different from the deity that's like described in the book.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's like, well, where did you get these from? Did you get them from inference or divine revelation? Because one could be lie, and the other definitely isn't truth. So, you know, me and Ocean have had quite a few conversations over some of the logical inconsistencies in the way that deities are described. Or deity, sorry, we just ignore the fact that the Old Testament does in fact have a pantheon. But.
Uh-oh, guys.
Oops. Sorry, forgot to drop that thing in there where Christianity has polytheism and it just calls God the head honcho until like
that's not polytheism though. That's a I don't know how to say the word henotheism. I had this conversation.
I've heard henotheism, henotheism. I've seen
I had this conversation with an atheist friend of mine the other day where she was like talking about the pantheon of the Old Testament, and I'm just like, hey, like that is polytheism, but it's also like a different thing that's not quite polytheism.
It has a consistency with it. Henotheism very much depends on the perspective of the worshiper.
Well, there's another word for that too. It's like Jesus, I'm gonna look it up later, but it's like canotheism. It's something like that.
I've never heard of this.
That's like, hold on.
It is like monolatry is another.
Wording,
I'm gonna look it up.
If it's canotheism, and if that has any type of like, if that has any relevance to just the word canon, that makes me all kinds of angry, because canon and what's in the Bible, that's an interesting conversation that usually starts with Paul.
Canotheism.
I'm looking it up right now on my other computer because like this is gonna drive me insane.
I'm seeing all right, this is funny. I'm seeing canotheism as the sacramental use of cannabis.
Okay, no.
I don't think that's what you're talking about.
I have it pulled up. I'm not making this up.
Okay.
Okay, Jesus. I'm just going to spell it. It's Katheno, theism. And it's the position that there is more than one God, but only one at a time should be worshipped. Each is supreme in turn.
So Cathenotheism?
Yes, Cathenotheism.
That's interesting.
I've never. That's an interesting perspective. And I've run into. I am of the impression that I have run into a bunch of different kinds of theistic people.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen that. before.
I've heard people have that position without using the word. I've heard people state that position almost exactly. It's like, hey, there are a multitude of gods. I pick and choose which one to worship at a time. And like it's really similar to my understanding of polytheism as a descriptor, not as like a practice.
Okay.
And it's weird. I feel like I'm not doing it justice, so I'm not going to talk a whole lot about it, but that is a position that
I would
exists.
be the snarky asshole if somebody presented me with that position to go, cool. So I will agree that all of them exist, and since I'm only allowed to choose one at a time, how about I choose none at all times, and I'm in the same position I am?
It makes me think like that the gods are in a line somewhere. Like,
all right, Thor, it's your turn.
Yeah, all right, and then but there is, I think that there's some practices that I guess you could say that are kind of like that. Now that I'm thinking about it, like there's some versions of Hinduism kind of have this approach, but it seems like there's a version of Hinduism for just about every image of God. But I don't know.
I know that the only God that I actually like talk to and listen to is currently sitting on my shoulder.
And his name is what? Terror?
Isn't that right? This one's Terror.
Yeah.
That's a nice name for a cat. Also, very accurate, probably.
It's incredibly accurate. You guys have been hearing it the entire stream, I'm sure.
Yeah, but it's like a nice meow. Like I'm totally down with that. It's adorable. This poor little thing.
She just had her bottle like an hour ago, and she's just like, I want things. I don't know what I want, though.
Crying out in desires.
So, what's next, you guys?
Obviously, kitty theism.
We've got about 15 minutes left, I guess. So there's, I guess there's a couple of other things that we can kind of throw out there. I was especially interested in the resistance that you've gotten from, your interfaith efforts. It seemed like there was a lot there. Is there any more of that you want to dig into?
While you're digging into that, chat, if you have any questions for Luciano, please post them in the chat, and we'll read them for Luciano.
Absolutely.
For the last bit.
Yeah.
I gave a thumbs up to indicate my approval of this topic, and then I realized I was looking at the wrong screen, which is great. So I think it's very interesting that like the resistance that most personally like hurt wasn't the resistance I got from polytheists, because I knew that this was going to happen at some point in time. It was the resistance I got from other like non-believers that actually kind of hurt, especially because in one case it came out of like nowhere, and it was someone who was a good friend of mine who was just like, hey, I like the part of the article where you talk about me and the other non-believers. I don't like the part of the article where you talk about the theists. And that really hurt me, because a lot of my activism has been drawing attention to the fact, especially like historically, has been drawing attention to the fact that Latin America has a very diverse religious tradition. And to say that it's only Christians or atheists is so wrong and so hurtful, not only to them as people, but also to like historians who have traced this really long and complex history.
You talked a little bit about that. We had a light discussion on that about like in order to really understand Latinx activism, knowing the history of the area is, especially the religious history, is like extremely important. And that it's not a historical narrative that's commonly known. Like Americans don't learn that stuff in schools. Mm-hmm. We just don't. Even though it's proximately extremely related to us, and the history does affect us. Especially we're to a large extent, America heavily involved in shaping that history, and has been for the past 100 years, if not more. So, yeah, stuff.
Also, for Reese, who just commented in there are two kittens. This is ours, and the other one is our roommate's, and he is currently comforting him in order to stem the tide of meows. But you do have a question from the chat, not entirely Not entirely related, but pineapple on pizza, merely an abomination, or definitely the reason that Yahweh should flood the earth again?
This is a very interesting question because, you know, I'm a very tolerant person. I don't get pineapple on my pizza, but if I were an all-powerful, all-knowing deity and I saw like the earth going the way it was going, seeing pineapple on pizza would probably be like the final straw for me.
You're just like, you know what? The Crusades, Civil War, genocide, World War I and II. I'm gonna give you guys one more chance. What the fuck is that on your pizza?
Well, okay, like I used to have a Tumblr, and I know Tumblr is just the worst community.
Yeah, Tumblr's a place that I just avoid.
Like my best ever post on Tumblr was a post I made back when I was really heavy in history, and I was just like, yeah, so if God is real, there is absolutely no reason why he would say, and this was shortly after the Obergefell v. Hodges Supreme Court case. So it was right after same-sex marriage had just been like decriminalized, legalized, whatever term you want to use, in all of the country. And people like right-wingers that I knew were going crazy and they were losing their minds. But my whole thing was just like, yeah, in the history of this country, you know, slavery, internment camps, nuking people, Jim Crow, God would finally lose his mind after gay marriage. That'd be the thing. Be like, you know what? Fuck this country.
All right, Luciano, what would you do for a Klondike bar?
What would I do for a Klondike bar?
Or are the bodies already on the floor?
I know what Klondike is. I've never had a Klondike bar.
It's like it's like an ice cream, a lump of ice cream that's covered in a hard chocolate.
Oh, okay. I was about to be like, I thought it was a chocolate bar, and then you're just like, all right, covered in chocolate. I'm like, cool, we're on the same page.
Yeah. There's a lot of ice cream in the middle, and it's tasty. And there's a lot of horrible, depraved things that I would do for a Klondike bar. Let me tell you what.
Especially
I'm trying to
a
think
dark
of what
chocolate
I would do
Klondike
for
bar.
one, but since I've never had one, I would like to try one. Is what I'm trying to get at. Very confused, Luciano.
The other question that was in the chat. None of these are on topic.
So this poor Brit. I'm sorry, I'm not British.
The roast game. The calories add up, or is it too simple?
Roast game.
I don't get it. I mean, I see that it is a question.
I don't know what's happening.
everything is devolving.
I think it's funny. Okay, question: was Lilith first wife of Adam? Yes. Yes. Just according to the Torah, yes. I was trying to think of the right way to dive into that, but yes.
So let me just say that Yahweh is a horrible matchmaker. He started off asking Adam if he wanted to fuck all the animals on the earth, and then he gave him a wife that divorced very, very quickly and is depicted as a serpent later. So, fucking hell. And then he gave him Eve, and Eve just like damned everybody. You ever think that the all-knowing, all-powerful God just really fucking sucks at Tinder?
Tinder.
We have another question, and I'm interested in everyone's opinion on this. Reese asks, have I looked into Mormonism? What's my opinion on it? I think Mormonism is a very interesting religion. It makes no sense. I think it's a very interesting religion. I like the historical implications of it. One of the things that I
like them.
I was about to say, you lost me at interesting.
Well, okay, like I feel like there's an idea worth exploring in Mormonism. It's not an idea anyone should take seriously, but it's an interesting idea, and it's this idea that God sent Jesus or some other like religious messenger to all of the people around the world, and then like the origin of all religions is people misinterpreting whatever that like prophet or Jesus or whatever you want to say did, and it's a bullshit idea.
I've got to say that thing that actually undermines their own position, though, because like the minute that you say that, it's like, okay, cool, so they could all be wrong. What about you? What made you immune?
Pagans have a similar thing on this. That there's a a group of like polytheists that say that all polytheistic faiths, including monotheistic faiths, are the same misinterpretation of an ancient, mostly unknown pan-Indo-European religion. That is like, going back to what is the first religion, and that one is the right one for reasons. And then talking like any developments on that, any like threads off of it are simply misunderstandings of the original message, which is a similar idea, I guess, to that. I think there's probably a little bit more merit to it because it like with just from a claims perspective, it involves less steps than Jesus showing up everywhere.
It involves less steps than like Native American Jewish people.
But I still find it to be really frustrating. Yeah, Native American Jewish people as well.
Yeah.
And the seat of the world being in Missouri or something like that.
I will say that the most interesting thing that I've ever gotten out of Mormonism is a wonderful musical. That was great. A decent South Park episode. That was cool too.
Latter-day Saints Church bought advertisements for at that musical.
They actually have advertisements where at the beginning it's like this advertisement with like cartoon silhouettes, and the cartoon silhouette is like looking at the Book of Mormon and goes, "Maybe you heard about us by watching the musical. Well, now you should read the book and find out more." And it's like, oh dear.
I'm gonna have the book is better approach.
So Reese asked another question. Reese keeps coming at us with the fire questions, and I appreciate it. So the question is, what is, like, it's another question that's directed towards me, but I think it's a good question for all of us to answer, especially Ocean. What are our favorite Greek god or goddess? And my personal favorite is Athena, because Athena is one of the virgin goddesses. She is one of the goddesses of wisdom. And also, like, she just has a really interesting origin story that a lot of people seem to forget. So,
we'll tell it.
Okay, so Zeus apparently. So the version I've heard is this: Zeus knocked up someone. There was a
That is how all Greek god stories begin. Zeus fucked the thing.
I don't need to.
Dionysus works that way. Dionysus works out that way, except Zeus winds up pregnant. Like, that's kind of a weird one. And not only does he wind up pregnant, he winds up pregnant in his leg.
Yeah.
That's not how the body is meant to work, guys. Okay.
Right, and even Athena pops out of, like, anyway, so you're probably going to say what I'm about to say.
Yeah. So, okay, there's this prophecy that the Greeks had where, like, at some point some god or goddess would overthrow Zeus. Made Zeus not very happy. He thought his next kid was going to be the one to do it. His next kid ended up being Athena. He ate Athena's mom. He started having headaches, and then, like, he goes over to Hephaestus. I'm telling a bastardization of the story that's going to make a lot of people angry. I'm trying to do it fast because we have like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And what happens is Zeus goes to Hephaestus. Hephaestus splits Zeus's head wide open, and Athena walks out fully grown like a boss bitch. And it's a really cool story. I like it. I hope people go and look it up.
As I will say, as far as like among the Greek goddesses, Athena is definitely up there as one of my favorite as well. Not only as a goddess of wisdom, but a goddess of civilization as well. Mm-hmm. Kind of like a civilization protector on the side of like human development and human thought. Something that I think is really neat. And I'm getting a call from somebody. No, not now.
Go away.
There's only like 5 minutes left, guys. All right, Cyrus, it's your turn.
I'd say as far as the Greek gods go, it's mine technically has to be Zeus, but not for any of the stories, like the classical stories of Zeus. Mine actually is Zeus because if you guys are familiar with the Injustice series, specifically the comic books, there's a scene. Trust me. There's a scene.
Right.
There's a scene in one of the comic books where Zeus comes down and is arguing with the old gods about whether or not they should intervene with all the crazy shit that's happening on Earth, and Harley Quinn like rushes Zeus and because Zeus like literally just fucking took away Shazam's powers, and it pisses off Harley Quinn. She like rushes Zeus in this attempt to stop Zeus from like being a dickhead, and Zeus just like looks at her, just kills her instantly, and sends her to hell. Is just like, I don't have time for this, and turns around and continues deliberating, and just like that solidified me going, yep, no, it's you. That was cool. You just sent Harley Quinn straight to hell instantly without
because of
even
this
blinking.
one comic book interaction, Zeus. Hats off, buddy.
Pretty much.
In Cyrus's mind, that is canon.
I mean, in my mind,
I've got a couple of Hellenists that'll probably disagree with you.
But if they, in my mind, they are all some level of fiction. Therefore, they're whether or not they are or are not canon means little to me. All that matters to me is whether or
This
not
is
I
a
enjoyed
story
it.
about Zeus, and I'm rolling with it. Like, that's
Exactly.
Let me have this, guys. I wanted to end the stream talking a little bit about the history of Latin America, but
Take your time. Go for it. We can go over a little bit for that.
All right, cool. So I'm going to give us a really, really, really brief version of it. I'm going to condense it so that way people know where people like me are coming from. But in order to start this off, it's worth noting, and lots of people know this now, but Spain started off not as like a Christian place, but as a place that was split between Muslims and Christians. And over the course of the 12th century to the end of the 15th century, there were a series of conflicts between Christians and Muslims. And it wasn't just Catholics, but it was very largely Catholics. It was Catholics who ended up taking over the country in the mid to late 15th century. And there was like, that explains why Catholics, especially in Spain, always had beefs with Muslims in Spain. And this boils over into their interactions in Latin America, but there was a lot of prejudice against Jews as well, which ended up culminating in something called the Alhambra Decree. And the Alhambra Decree was a decree by Ferdinand and Isabella, but from what I've heard, mostly by Isabella, that basically says that the Jews should not be in Spain. Any Jews who stay in Spain have to convert, or if they stay in Spain and don't convert, they're going to die. And there's a lot of speculation.
There's a long Spanish tradition of doing that kind of thing, I think.
Yeah. But there's a lot of speculation that Columbus was what was called a crypto Jew. And also, it's a known fact that there were several crypto Jews, which is a very suspicious sounding term. But basically, it's.
I'm about to say, like, you know,
given
going
modern,
with this?
No, okay, yeah. So
given modern connotations, I think that could actually mean something completely different nowadays.
Well,
right.
Yeah, but originally, especially in the context of where I'm approaching it from a Latin American context, this refers to the Jews who were determined to keep up their beliefs, and they kept their beliefs either in secrecy or they went to remote parts of Latin America and they practiced their beliefs openly. And Puerto Rico, which is, as everyone knows, where I'm from, has a very long history of being very supportive to the Jewish community. And it's something that lots of Sephardic Jews, which was the word I was struggling with earlier, it's something that has a very long tradition in Puerto Rico and also in parts of Honduras. And the Alhambra Decree, what it basically did was make it so that there were rules and regulations that criminalized anything related to Jewish behavior. And the Spanish Inquisition, which wasn't just in Spain, but also in the New World, was very active. And instead of persecuting the indigenous people, the main thing that they looked for were actually people who they suspected of being Jewish. And there's a history that is way too complex for me to go into in any level of justice, especially with like 3 or 4 minutes left. But for people who are interested, there are books on this subject and there are resources and there are lots of websites that people can find that are really, really good and that have really long like biographies and bibliographies at the end of each page that explore this topic in detail. But when I and other Hispanic atheists and Hispanic Jews and Muslims talk about the long and complex history of Latin American theology, like, we're being serious. We're not just saying, oh, hey, our ancestors were this because we think they were. We have histories that we can trace and that we can understand that allow us to know this with certainty.
Actually, that's actually something that in the future, if you've got time, I wouldn't mind doing a video collaboration on my channel where you go into the history about that as an actual video, because I do the the Let's Have a Conversation videos, which were more educational. That actually would be a pretty good topic for that if you wanted to get some exposure on that.
Yeah, I would absolutely love that. Hispanic Heritage Month ended 10 days ago, and I wrote articles and I wrote like Facebook posts where I talked about this because this is something that I'm extremely passionate about, and that should come as no surprise to people. But I've worked with Hispanic Jewish like authors and historians to cover this topic in detail. This is something that I actually have like a history of working with.
Sweet.
Excellent.
Yeah, like that's something that if there's anything else that you want to just like talk about it for a little while, I'm happy to lend you the extra time. I guess for this, I'll throw at you. What is the fact? Like, if you can pick a single historical fact about Latin American history that you would want everyone to know, what's one that you would pick to like throw out there? If you could just pick one to be like, know this at least. This is really important, guys.
I would say that is a really tough question.
You can pick two.
Reese isn't the only one that can hit you with the hard ones.
Yeah, this is such a like difficult. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like ones that would be really, 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 really solid. There is a complex underlying history that people should know about, not just because people like me are new voices in our community and are working hard to normalize this history, but also because this has direct implications and direct relations to things like the ongoing immigrant caravan from Honduras that's coming to the United States. And I would love to talk about that more because I lived in Honduras, and Honduras is my second home. I feel extraordinarily strongly about that, but that's a topic for a different day. And if I had to say a second one, something that's really neat is that Pope Francis is from Argentina, and he and the president of Argentina got into a fight because there was a president of Argentina that supported gay marriage and like adoption equality, and Pope Francis doesn't because he's a bad person, and everyone thinks that he's a good person, but I hate him. He's bad.
and so we can definitely end that on Pope Francis is a douche.
Pope Francis
okay. It's worth noting he sent a letter to like Argentinian government officials where he's like, yo, don't let Satan into your homes and don't let gay people, aka demons, adopt kids.
Gay people are demons?
Lord.
Like, no, like there's a reason why there are people like me who are just like, yeah, he's a bad person.
Okay, that's interesting. I guess if you want to, any parting words that before we end the stream, if you want to, is there anything you want to like put out there? You go ahead and plug yourself a little bit and let people know where to find you.
And just so everybody knows, the links to his stuff is in the description, so please go check that out after the video.
Hey, so I guess I'll do a very brief bio again. I'm a YouTuber and writer. My YouTube channel is Luciano's Logic, and I have various different blogs. I run the Honduras Report, which is a newspaper that translates stuff from Spanish to English. I run Sin God, which is a blog that talks about atheism and humanism in Latin America. And I run a website where I talk about peace and conflict studies called LucianoTheWriter.com. I hope you guys will come and check out my stuff, and I hope to be back soon.
Awesome.
Well, we'd love to have you back, especially both on the podcast and on an actual collaboration at some point if you want to get into that history video.
Yeah.
All right. Happy Thursday, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us, and thanks to all our viewers that have come out to check us out and check out Luciano, and just definitely stop by his links. It'll be in the video description.
Yep. Thank you all for coming out, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.